this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. I am here today with Nicole Campbell, who is actually someone that I know very well. And I think that this is an episode that will be very beneficial to those of you who have worked in an agency, have considered your own practice, enjoy clinical work, and maybe hesitate to take the plunge, but to show that it's challenging, but it's possible, and a little bit more of the reality of what that entails while she's in the midst of it. So, Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So would you introduce yourself to the audience? Give us a little bit of background and what you currently have going on.
Sure. I am a licensed independent clinical social worker. I have sort of always had my primary home in community social work jobs. I worked for DCF for a number of years. I've been in a housing authority, some grant work, really like frontline social work, which I love, but can be, constraining. I think there are a lot of things that I want to do, and protocol and policy tell me no. So I got into private practice work 3 years ago now, and was lucky enough to find you. We connected on a lot of shared vision and goals stuff, and you gave me a home to sort of practice private practice and see what I love and what feels natural, and pursue some trainings. And I think I'm at a place now, I know better who I am as a clinician and what I bring to the table. So thank you for that opportunity to explore with some stability. Not everybody's afforded that. So it's been a great journey to here, where it's now transitioning out and opening my own private practice with your consulting help.
Oh, yeah. So it has been quite a journey. So from my perspective, I mean, we have all been so lucky to have you on our team, because you are a social worker through and through. You are such a strong advocate. You have phenomenal clinical skills. The relationships that you have formed with your clients and the work you do has opened my eyes, has helped me learn, and I know it's been really helpful for the rest of the team. So it's been wonderful. And you were always very clear that your end goal was independent licensure and your own practice, but there were some discussions around what that would look like and how that would actually play out and when it was going to be right. So for you to be at a point now where you're making this transition, and it's a big one, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about what it's been like for you, but you're at such an exciting, but I'm sure also a little bit daunting point in the whole process. So tell us how this idea came about for your practice and what it's been like in these early stages.
Yeah, so I think, to your point, we've had meeting upon meeting and supervisions about, what I want. And I think, there's a scarcity mindset that we have where it's like, I need the pension, I need the benefits, I have to be secure because I have kids and it is just me. And so definitely a lot of back and forth around what it would look like, crunching numbers with your help on my own. And ultimately it was a gut check really of, I can keep standing on the edge talking about this and planning and trying to control all the pieces and hope that they line up how I envision, or I can trust myself and take the leap knowing I have, you who can help me with the actual process, right? Because it's not just overcoming the fear factor. There are logistical steps that make the process sort of nightmarish. And I think if I had taken the jump without you on that journey with me, I may have pulled back. It is really overwhelming. The checkpoints for credentialing are like, it's a wild goose hunt. It never really, it feels like, oh, I'm here, I've done it. And then you get an
They
email.
throw another monkey wrench in.
Yes, I've got nothing accomplished. So what did we start? I think we had the conversation initially in January and we got rolling pretty immediately. And it was like, I'm going to open this part-time practice and I'm going to keep my job. And the original conversation was just transitioning to have my own space. And
right.
More recently, I've decided I'm leaving agency work altogether and I'm going to be full-time solo, which is scary and exhilarating all at once. So.
Absolutely. So before we get into that and what your question is today, speak a little bit more to this decision that you ultimately made once you got your practice going to ultimately leave the security and the stability and what you've known for so long in your career to really go with what you feel compelled to do and what is something that seems like it's really ingrained within you. Like the sense that I always got from you is like, if you didn't ultimately take this plunge, it would have been a huge regret. It was never a question. You were going to do it. It was just when and how. And one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got from someone is basically don't wait till you have everything in order. Get the basics squared away, but go for it, because ultimately we can talk ourselves out of so much and it can be daunting and overwhelming, but it's not insurmountable and it is doable with the right support. So I'm glad you feel like you had that, but you're on the precipice here. So tell me a little bit more about what made you feel as confident as you can about this leap.
So I am simultaneously impulsive and absolutely like procrastinating. And I'm all or nothing, black or white. The gray area is like something I talk about and I would love to find, and I have yet to do it. So I sort of am a rolling stone. I was like, I got it in my head that like it's time. And so I just sort of, I did the numbers again and I thought about my life and what I'm looking for, my kids and their ages and where they're headed. And for viewers' own reference, I have kids in all ages. So I have a daughter who will be a junior in college, and then a middle schooler who's going into his last year of middle school, and then my baby is going to kindergarten. So I have very like milestone things coming up with all of my kids. And when my older kids were younger, I was in school, I was working 2 jobs and doing internships and all the things. And I feel really like this is that last summer before my last kid goes off to become his own person, which is melodramatic and emotional and all the things. But that is how I started my framework. I'm like, what? And I think, COVID allowed all of us to think in broader terms about what our lives can look like. But we got into this field and we do all the work to have this independent licensure that allows for autonomy. And so I can wait, right, until I'm vested and all these like really secure middle America ideals and goals, or I can take the risk and jump in. And I think it was a lot of my own like self-talk and work around, has there been a goal that I haven't achieved and or learned something worthwhile from? And if this didn't work, what would that look like? And the reality is I'm highly qualified for any job in the field. So if it doesn't work, might as well get a job. And so that like worst case scenario, it doesn't work. And I've gotten this summer to sort of have a schedule with my family that works for me. Best case, it goes great. And I have a career that I love and I keep that autonomy and flexibility for the rest of my life. And so I think there's not really a downside, and waiting was starting to make me feel low.
Yes.
Low. Yeah. So
it's so inspiring, and another reason why I'm so grateful that you were willing to come on and share this story, because we all have our own journey and there are challenges, but I think, for you, you've always been someone who inspired me because you never let anything get in your way, whether it was your master's program, whether it was juggling multiple jobs, doing the clinical work that you loved in a way that worked, but you were never able to just do that in isolation. There were always all these other pieces, and you still put your clients first and did such incredible work. So this has proven to be much of the same. So with you transitioning out of your main job, starting your practice kind of slow and building up, and then gearing yourself up for doing this full time, give the listeners an idea of kind of where things are at right now and how you're feeling about this and some of the things that you've put in place. And I also love the attitude too. I have to speak to that. Going into this, that could not be a better perspective. You're absolutely right. You're totally qualified to do anything. It almost seemed like you got to a point where you had to do this because you need to see for yourself how it goes. And you're ultimately prepared for either direction that it's going to go in. And I have every faith it's going to be great. So give us a snapshot of where you're at now, what your timeline looks like for those that maybe have considered the same and hesitated for similar reasons that you did.
So right now I am 2.5 weeks out from leaving my agency job, which is a little bit of a, I don't think I can swear on this, but a mind F, if you will. Because I have always been somebody's employee, right, for my whole life. And
Yes.
I'm 40 years old and I'm about to be the only one in charge of everything, which is thrilling. So I'm still working, wrapping up things at my job. It's a grant, so I have a lot of data and metrics work to sort of get situated. I'm also working every day because I did rent a space, which means that I have to sustain it along with, the costs associated, my EHR, my Ring RX, those types of costs. So I'm seeing probably more clients than I can realistically see while working a full-time job. But my office is close to my son's daycare and my work. And so I've been able to make it work, but I am right now scheduling people for the first week of June, my first full-time week solo. And I have definitely filled my quota of clients I can take. I'm sure we'll get into, but I'm ready. It's sort of the countdown is on, and I've got, and you and I have talked at length about this too. I am very well aware of my skill set and where I'm strong and where I'm really not. And so I pretty early on and immediately, maybe before it made financial sense, hired a biller. Because again, like if I hadn't had you, I would be out. Same thing. Like navigating insurance and all this stuff is not how I want to spend my time. It frustrates me. It makes me feel incompetent. It overwhelms me. And so I said, I'm taking it off my plate. And, I pay a small percentage and it's been well worth it. My money's sort of rolling in. I can see in my account, I'm getting it, but I don't have to be in navigating when there's pushback, which of course happens at every step with insurance. It's like, it's not even getting to me until it's a problem that requires my assistance. So I really, I like my biller a lot. I think she's made my life much easier, and I would not do it any other way at this point. Maybe someday I'll be more comfortable with the role and have space to take it on. But right now it just felt like a deterrent rather than something that, made my business more valuable to me. So I'm just ready.
I love it. So just for a frame of reference, we're now mid-May and you got all of this going. Was it right at the beginning of the year, end of last year? What month?
Yeah, I think I very cryptically emailed you on January 1. It was like, my life needs to take a new direction. Effective immediately.
Yep.
But that's another example of I got it in my head and I was like, stop, connect with Julia. And I know we've had this conversation, but thank you for the support and the encouragement. And the process has just been smooth. We've communicated every step. And I think we both have a good appreciation for intentions versus reality. And so things have gotten funky just through the process because it's a challenge and it's an up and down roller
Well, I
coaster.
think you're speaking really to the uncertainty of, right, you were kind of really clear on this is what I want to do, and we collaborated. And then as much as I try to prepare people for what this process is going to look like, insurance credentialing is what we're referring to, there is so much unknown within that. I mean, we're ultimately relying on multiple different companies to follow through on their end and move through this process. And we then have clients that we, need to give some sort of a frame of reference of what things are going to look like. And that's why we kind of refer to it as the Wild West, because we can give estimations of time frames. But I mean, even getting right on that, submitting the applications, following through on those applications, there were still twists and turns. But I'm happy that we were able to get through that together. We're in the last leg. I think you're credentialed with everything, but Medicaid is the real challenge for us. We're located in Massachusetts. So yeah, I think ultimately the other piece I wanted to speak to as well was you were talking about this, basically transition time frame, things that were really helpful. So before we get into your question, what are some things that you ultimately did that you would recommend to other people? Because I love that you mentioned the biller component. That just speaks to how everybody has a different process and that we all have to figure out what works for us. And the fact that you were able to acknowledge this is something that is going to discourage me in this process and I want to go full steam ahead, do what I love, do what I enjoy. It's worth it to pay a percentage to have somebody navigate this piece for me. So that was a great one. What are some other things you would say that would be helpful to someone? Because you did this relatively quickly. I mean, in a 5-month process, you're like geared up and ready to go.
Yeah, so I think for me, like the biller, paying you to do my packets was well worth every cent and beyond, because that, again, that would have deterred me. It would have felt overwhelming. It's not a straightforward process. So hiring a consultant, and I was really, really lucky to sort of have been tapping your brain for a few years about these things. And so we had, you had shared resources that sort of broke the process down. But I think I got really bogged down initially with things that maybe didn't matter so much. Like, when I was doing my LLC, I should have explored those processes a little bit more. Because I had used an address so that I could sort of fast track the process, but then found out later that when you have to change it, it's a slower process. So again, and that's sort of Nicole's stuff that I'm aware of when I dive in. I'm not necessarily going with an organized to-do list. And that's part of why you and I worked well together, because where I'm free falling, you're sort of like, bring it in.
Yeah.
But, I think that and connecting with people in a opinion seeking space. And so everybody's got a thought of what makes sense. And, I love my family and my friends, but a lot of them share that mindset of job security and knowing what is coming in and what day, and that you have benefits and what if something happens. And so every time I would be ready to pull the trigger, and then I'd have these conversations, so I guess that probably leads into my question that I have for you anyways. So,
but before you get into it really quickly, I think the point that you're making is such a good one. And I want to make sure I get this right. So you're basically saying that it's helpful to have the support and the feedback from your family and your friends. But I'm assuming what you would ultimately say is we have to figure it out for ourselves. So we take it in, we kind of filter it, and we really look at the source. And everyone is well-intentioned, right? I mean, if they're in our inner circle, they're just looking out for you and they want to make sure that everything is okay. But you still move forward anyways. And you're ultimately the one that has to navigate if things go awry. So I don't know, anything you would say to that piece? Because I think that's so important and really hard for us, because we can compare ourselves to so many other people and we do get a lot of opinions.
Yeah, it all boils back down to really the gut check. What is my intuition telling me? And what do I know about myself and life? And what I know is I've been broke and single and still done what I needed to do. And I have resources and skill sets and people in my corner. Like, I'm not going to fail. I will make mistakes for sure. That's happening currently. I'm like, you know, making the mistakes. But I think realistically it's like this knowing. Like, if you've gotten through all the things you have to do just to have an LI, you're persistent, you're driven. Like, it's not a process that you just fall into. You dedicate years and years and years. And so if I've done that, what would stop me from continuing to grow and progress? And there is nothing that's scary enough to stop that sort of natural flow that happens when you embark on this, I think. So
I wholeheartedly agree, and knowing you even more so. So I'm really excited to see where this goes for you. So yes, let's hear your question.
So back into mindset stuff, scarcity and money and feeling comfortable that it will continue to flow and, that I will be secure. Because even though I'm saying I want to pursue this and I know it will work out, like, I still have bills, I have a mortgage, I have 3 kids. Like, I need to have more than just like a hope and a prayer that it will be okay. And so when I've started, accepting referrals and I'm booking out for that first, second week of June, a big draw of this is to have autonomy and flexibility and have some time this summer to really lean into my life outside of professionalism. And so I was like, had picked my perfect client number. And then, I know I'm going into a season, I'm starting during prime cancellation season. People have stuff they're doing. It becomes less of a priority. They're outside. They're feeling better sometimes mentally just because they have warm weather and sunshine. And so there's, and even in my private practice journey already, there have been weeks where it's like you get a bunch of cancellations and it's like, oh dear, what will I do when this happens? So I think my question is around when you're taking these people on, how do you know when enough is enough, and to not go that extra step for security where then I'm looking at 35 clients a week and it's worse than working at an agency because I have no time. And I just don't want to put myself in a funk where it's not enjoyable and allowing me freedom. And so how do you challenge that scarcity mindset and trust that you will get the amount of clients you need to see without sort of hoarding them?
So it sounds like the main driving force for you is obviously to ensure that you can cover everything that you need to do and have financial peace of mind. But you're also very cognizant of maybe where you came from and why you're doing this. And so you want to be able to be there for your family and be a good version of yourself for those people in your life and not burnt out from seeing too many people. But I'm also hearing a piece, I wonder if this is accurate, where when you're getting all of these referrals and people are reaching out, is there also a part of you that is nervous that if you say no, then that referral is not ultimately going to continue coming from that particular source?
Yeah, and even beyond that, I'm glad you pushed me further into this conversation as well, right? Like, everybody, and I don't know if you do this, or I'm assuming at this point with how big the practice is, maybe you don't, but I do the free consultation call. And so, me, I'm empathetic, and I'm like, I'm connecting with people, and I know what the wait lists are. I know how hard it is. I know how hopeless you can feel. And when you're reaching out, particularly if that's not in your comfort zone and it's your first outreach, I want to take you on and help you because
of course
that's what I do, and I'm good at it. And I connect very easily with people, and it's hard to do that call or to hear somebody's story and not want to navigate and fit them in. And how do you turn on who you are, which is an empathetic people person?
Okay, so lots to say on this. I'm going to try to do it as succinctly and clear as possible. So first and foremost, knowing you as well as I do, Enneagram 2, I just want to say that we recently introduced the Enneagram on this podcast. And so you are the helper. So just be mindful of the fact that that's inherently who you are, and your motivation is to be that go-to for people. And so will there always be need? Yes. But do you always have to be the one to meet that need? And I know it feels so different when we're just talking about it versus you're the one on the phone with the person who's sharing their situation and looking for help right now and struggled to get in to see someone. I know the two are very different, but I think that's something to keep in mind. So I'm going to speak to this coming from someone who has 100% been there. So I started my journey very similarly to yours. I was working for a hospital and had that kind of consistency and predictability, started solo, started part-time, geared myself up, and then finally took the plunge where I felt like I had enough ducks in a row and also had a mortgage and was a single mom. And so with all that being said, now that we're a group practice, I've learned it doesn't matter how many clinicians we hire. There will always be more clients than we can help. And so on that end, what I would say is don't ever worry. And I can speak to this personally because we're in the same geographic area. I mean, being in Massachusetts, being insurance-based practices, knowing the level of need out there, and even more so now because of the pandemic, there's never going to be a shortage of clients. So if you go into this with the mentality of you are very clear on the clients you do your best work with, the work that you enjoy the most, the specialization that you have, you're phenomenal with couples, but then you've also done some exploration around even beyond that, kind of in your individual work, who you do your best work with. So I guess my thought would be, don't forget to take that time to get really clear on who that ideal client is for you. That number that you calculated, knowing the average insurance reimbursement and what you need to make by the end of the year, factoring in some time off for yourself, factoring in some cancellations each week, shoot for that. And if you need to see maybe or schedule one or two more clients to feel comfortable, but make sure that you're not getting beyond that because of exactly the point you made, which is you still want to enjoy this at the end of the day. You want to be doing your best work, and you don't want to lose sight on the reasons why you did this in the first place, to have that flexibility and to have that autonomy. So I know that you outsourced to a biller, and I'm so happy that you did that. My thought for you would be the next outsourcing, and this may sound silly because you're in solo practice, but to find someone who can answer those calls for you so that you're not the one directly on the phone having to hear that person's situation because you know you're inclined to want to help and it's really hard to say no. Or when you get to that point when you're filled, don't hesitate to put on your website or to put on your recording that you're not accepting new clients currently. Maybe provide some resources for other clinicians who are, and please check back because this is changing all the time, so that it's less of that you're on the line having to make that call and more of a keep checking back, keep seeing where I'm at. Things change all the time, but it's okay for you to stick to that number. And let's also focus on the fact that this is new for you to be doing strictly clinical work full time. You're used to doing all the things, agency and clients and everything else. I mean, we haven't even spoken about how you're a trained divorce mediator. You're doing some parenting coordination training. You write evaluations for the court. So, with all that being said, you're also going to have that stuff going on too. Mm-hmm. And you want to make sure you get clear about reserving time for those cases, but also some of the admin stuff. So with all that being said, I would definitely consider what feels best for you so that you're not necessarily always the one that's on the line having to have those direct conversations. Now, tell me more about the free consult. So what's driving that for you at this point?
So for me, it's a variety of things. Number one, I think starting off is the scarcity, right? Like, am I going to get people, particularly when I first started and I was credentialing, I had no insurances. So it was like private pay until things pick up. So you have to have that conversation because,
right,
not everybody can or will private pay. And then secondly, like I do need to know if it's a good fit schedule wise. I prefer in-person work. I'll take, I have a few telehealth people, but my preference is to do the work in person. So
Yeah.
are you somebody who is willing and able to get in? What's your schedule like? Because I do want to make sure that I'm catering to the hours I want. I don't want to work on weekends. I'm only going to work 2 nights a week. So there are some logistical things that require me to have conversations with people. And I think, sometimes, so I was listed on Psychology Today. Sometimes just that outreach can be overwhelming. It's like an email and you get, one fact, but you have follow-up questions. And sometimes it makes more sense to say, when do you have time to jump on a call? Because these questions feel easier to talk about than to email back and forth about.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I would like to not have, high turnover where I get a client in, do all the onboarding work that comes with that, do an assessment, only to find out realistically they can't get into the office, or the schedule, they told me they were fully flexible and now they can only do Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Like, I need to have an actual sense of who I'm taking on, because this is the work I'm going to do. And I don't know for exactly how long, but it has to work for me too. So
Yeah,
think
I
it's
totally
worth
respect that.
minutes. I do.
Yeah, and that's a very personal decision. And if you put that out there to the masses, I think you're going to get people in both camps. And there's nothing to say that you can't do that when you feel that it's necessary. But I'm confident that as time goes on and you get a lot clearer from the experience that you've just had over the last couple of weeks or months as you're fielding these phone calls and these referrals, if you're really clear on your website, and that's not to say that clients are going to read every detail, but if your availability is on there, or you allow people to online schedule, you have a really solid questionnaire with screening questions. These are the populations that I work with and would really encourage you to complete the referral if so, and then maybe these would be not the best fit. But then I also think with those consults, I mean, you've already done the bulk of the work from what it sounds like. You feel confident enough to take that plunge. That tells me, for the most part, you're full. If you're going to be taking anyone else on, it makes sense to me that there might be that screening call, because you're filling this one kind of coveted opening, let's say, that you may have. And even more so, you're going to want to make sure that the person that fills that spot can more than likely keep that spot, and that they are the right fit because you now have this full caseload. So I support you in doing that if you really see value in that. I do think as time goes on, you might see less of a need for that, and maybe potentially having someone answer the phone to help field some of those calls can be helpful. But you're right, there's really nothing quite like you being the one to do that, but it makes it so much harder to say no. And I think you ultimately have to weigh the scales of, is the time that you spend kind of worth how that plays out in the long haul? And for you, it sounds like right now it is. Because if you're taking that time, it's preventing you from someone who might not be a good fit, and you've done all of this work initially and then they're no longer coming. So it sounds like you've made your choice with that, but I don't think that that's something you may need to be doing long term. And there'll be a lot less of those calls in the coming months from what it sounds like.
Yeah, and I froze my Psychology Today, and I think I underestimated. I chose purposefully to stay in the community where I've worked and where I sort of grew up, and I know people, and I underestimated the referrals that just come from people who you've interacted with in your community setting, and that know, oh, they helped this one for this, and I'm going to send somebody. I think I would say I probably 60% already is referral based from colleagues, and which I didn't necessarily anticipate, a ton from my clients.
Yeah.
I have one girl I think she sent her whole crew, and I'm like, okay.
Extremely flattering. That's incredible. So again, another frame of reference for people who might be a few months behind you. And I recognize this is very specific on where you are geographically and whether you're going to be an insurance-based or private pay practice. But how long did it take you from the time that you really invested a lot of energy into filling your schedule till the time you were full?
So the first round for part-time, and this was with the problem of not being credentialed yet. I think I was full for what I could handle at the time within 2 or 3 weeks. Froze my Psychology Today, got into the groove with them, got a few credentialings done, opened back up. And this was actually via Facebook. I have a page, which I didn't really anticipate would be super helpful, but I used the boost function, which is a really good value for the money. So I did that, filled back up. And then when I decided I was going full time and I like put that out there, which was only like 2 weeks ago, I turned my Psychology Today back on, did a Facebook boost, and I'm full to capacity and a few beyond capacity, what it realistically should be. So, yeah, it's quick. The need is there, and
yes. Well, so I'm glad that we'll now have this episode that you can refer back to because you're answering your own question. We are not anticipating that this is going to change in the near future. So it's not a question of, are you going to have enough clients or are you going to be able to find the right clients, and you're figuring out your own process for that. I would actually encourage, and coming at it from the place that I'm at now of having done solo practice and done therapy for over a decade and then transitioning my caseload and being in this position, it's one of the things that I wish I had been clearer about when I started. This is my schedule. This is when I'm available. That's not to say that you can't make an exception here or there depending on the circumstance, but that overall, this is what works best for me. You're ultimately going to do your best work when you're in that zone. Clients understand. There was a period of time where I was seeing the bulk of my clients 2 days a week because those are the days that my daughter was with her father. I wouldn't recommend this, but I was seeing 10 to 12 clients on those days. And when I gave my clients a heads up that that was going to be my availability, I can't think of one person that didn't make it work. And I am grateful that that was the case. And I know that that won't be the case for everyone, but there is such a need. You have an incredible skill set. You do great work, hence why your clients were referring people to you. And so just remind yourself of that. The piece that I'd work on more is the, why am I doing this? Let me stay true to what my vision was. I need flexibility and autonomy. I need time with my family, but I also want to do really good work. And you also have other interests and you want to have time for trainings and, all of that. And so they will come. There's no question about it. I think you're going to have more regret saying no to someone that needed your help because they will find help versus saying yes to too many people and being in a position like, now I'm here, I'm committed, this is my client, and I need to provide the best care even when you're not necessarily in the best position to do so. That's going to have more repercussions in the long term versus that short term feels great. You connect with someone, you feel like you can help them, you say yes, and you schedule them, thinking about what that's going to look like a few months down the line. When you have multiple clients like that and your main caseload is a lot in addition to everything else. So I'm here to support you through it.
Well, brings up another question. I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to just dive in. Have you ever, or would you recommend using the client self-scheduling tool on Simple Practice, which is our EHR? It's really user-friendly. I find it pretty easy to navigate, but I'm curious, what happens when you leave it up to God and
that's a great question. So if you were going to do that eventually, I would just make sure you feel very comfortable with all of your consent forms and your policies and your questionnaire. Because ultimately, if you're not doing that screening, you want to make sure that you're as prepared as you can be and that the client is as prepared as they can be when they come in for that first session, that they already feel like this is a good fit. They've done their piece and you've kind of had some of that screening tool. But there are some people it works great for, and there are others that will always do kind of the way that you've been doing it, where you have a check-in. It can be a little daunting, but I would say that the majority of people that do it, once they get into it, it works really well because you're getting so much clearer on who your ideal client is and really speaking to that on your Psychology Today profile and on your website. And the word is being spread. You're building a reputation in the community for who you do your best work with. So I think you'll feel more confident to be able to do that as time goes on. And what a beautiful thing if you're full and then you happen to have an opening and you open it up and then it's full. so much less time and effort on your part if it goes well and you put those parameters in place. So I'll stay tuned and see how your experience is if you decide to go that route. But well, I can't thank you enough for being willing to come on here, for sharing your journey. It has been an absolute honor. I'm so glad that we connected. Like you had said, that shared kind of vision in the beginning, we've really been able to not only maintain focus on that throughout your work with Compassionate Counseling Company, but to see that flourish and you kind of adjust and adapt that for your own practice has been so rewarding. So share with everyone about this practice, how they can find you, and who your ideal client is, if you were to kind of say it succinctly so people know.
Sure. So it's Next Chapter Collaborative in Taunton. That's the website. It's www.nextchaptercollaborative. And my office is located downtown Taunton. Sort of tricky to find the first time. It's like a little hidden alleyway, but it's worth it. Like the Secret Garden. It's a beautiful space. Really quiet and private. I love it. I can be reached. Psychology Today is frozen, but my business line is 508-301-7992. And what else did you ask about the practice?
Yeah, so your ideal client, who?
So I'm a glutton for punishment. I absolutely love couples work. It is like invigorating. I leave every session. I mean, even the hard ones, I feel like I've been in something, I'm like helping people navigate. Communication is such like a big piece of what we do and how we connect with everybody in and out of our professional personas. So I'm super interested in how our wires get crossed and we like stop understanding the people we love the most and stop feeling understood by them. So that work feels so fulfilling and gratifying. Outside of that, I do not work with children. I have a few young adults that are a good fit, but mostly I'm working with adult professionals who, are sort of having the onus of keeping it all together and being like this, high functioning person is how they're perceived. And then we've got all this background baggage and stuff. And how do you navigate that while still showing up for the roles that you've already sort of identified into? You're a parent, an employee, a boss, whatever. And like all this stuff that you now maybe have time to address. And it's been there for 40 years, just waiting for you to have a minute. So that work feels really relatable to me. I feel like I do good work connecting with people who have been in survival mode for most of their life and have a minute to unpack that and start something new that they didn't necessarily envision for themselves. So
wonderful. All right. Well, I will make sure to include all of that in our show notes so people can access you easily. And I am not touching that dial. I'm going to stay tuned for this journey and see where it takes you. I could not be happier for you. So thanks for your time today and all the incredible work that you do.
Thanks for everything, Julia. Nice talking to you.
Absolutely. You too. If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.